We have an agenda for discussion here on ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. There's been a lot of recent changes and developments in the last couple of months. I don't know how much everybody knows about it, but we're going to start off by talking about that. I'm going to share out my screen so you guys can all see, the agenda. But really, just to take you back in terms of what's happened, late last year, ChatGPT launched, and ChatGPT is an AI tool that you can prompt it with a question, get a text response back, and that text response is very robust in terms of feeling like it's written by a human. Could be research oriented, it could be ideation based, it has a lot of applications and uses. And if you've ever tested it out, it's really robust in terms of what it says back. So I wanted to first talk about what it is and the impact there, and have anybody ask any questions from what they already know or don't know. And then we'll go into how we've seen it used and how we are using it. And there's some good conversation in there. Talk about what's on the horizon for generative AI outside of textual prompts like video and image, and then what some of the impact and opportunity will be to us and our clients. And then we'll leave off with some resources that we could probably pull together into the agenda. I'm going to share out my screen now. The agenda is up here so we can talk through it. And feel free to take your own notes, or if you have this agenda, which is linked in the Slack conversation, you can kind of note in there. So ChatGPT, what is it? Does anybody not know what it is or has not experienced it or played with it? If you want to raise your hand, feel free to ask a question. And if not, I'll assume everybody already knows what it is and has at least seen a prompt and response or read a freakish New York Times article. Cool. All right. So no need to worry about that. So how have we seen it used? How have we used it? I mean, I think I'm going to pass off to Jim on this one to start, because I know he's already had some discussions and we've already had some discussions with clients about questions that they're asking and ways that we've applied it. So Jim, feel free to chime in here.
Sure. I know for the most part, what we've been relating to clients and how we've used ourselves has been for research, for content creation, ideation, and essentially to eliminate that base research phase and not starting with a blank canvas, especially for tough niche industries. It's a good starting point to at least get the information you need. You can't copy and paste it, obviously, and there's a lot of people, the more people that use it anyway, are finding out, I'll get feedback like, I got the answer, but the answer doesn't seem right. That's exactly what it's intended to be, because it's scraping everything it can find. It's not a search engine. I think that's the biggest misconception, is that a lot of people think that ChatGPT is a search engine and it's going to come in and dominate Google and Bing and everything. And that's not it at all. ChatGPT is not a search engine. It's actually scraping everything in a search engine to give you an answer. So it's more akin to like exactly what's called a chat bot, where you prompt it, you get an answer, but the information, it's supposed to be accurate. It is accurate most of the times, but that's not to say that any kind of answer you get as far as any kind of content creation or ideas to start with content, so you're not starting with a blank canvas. It still has to be reviewed by a human for accuracy, for tone, for voice, make sure it matches, how we're speaking to, let's say, a target persona, because these are all things like emotion. It's not giving you an emotional response. It's literally just giving you information it's scraping. So how we've seen it and how I've seen it used most often is exactly for that purpose, where instead of doing, say, a Google search and having to scroll through, 18 different scrolls and go to 18 different entries to find the answer that you need, if you prompt ChatGPT with that, it's doing that legwork for you. All that research that you might spend hours doing, it's condensing all that down. So it's at least giving you a starting point. Then if anything doesn't look right, you can go out there, you can fix it. You can do some secondary research just to make sure. One unique usage I actually got from one of our clients on one of our calls was they like to produce content, but the content they produce, it's something akin to how has this industry impacted year over year, or what changes happened from a decade ago until the past decade? And then they need citations and sources for that information. So we actually tested it live on the call. And unique thing is that it will give that information to you if you give it the right prompt. So we prompted to give us, I think, like year over year data, including citations for the source of the information of the statistics. And it did exactly that. It dropped the links right in there. And the links it dropped in there were high quality, they're authoritative, they were .gov or .org type domains and websites. So it wasn't just like a blog that it picked up that somebody said, oh, this is the number for you. It actually gave us what we asked for, a credible authoritative source. Another thing I've been using it for personally is getting my ideas together in an outline. If I'm starting a project, actually one of our lunch and learns, just to test it out, I entered what the lunch and learn was about, and I asked it to create an outline for me that I could follow, because it won't create, like a presentation for you. It won't do that yet, because it's still just a textual prompt and answer. So what I asked it for was just a basic outline, or like an index of the presentation, to help guide me while I was creating it. And it really did help me gather my thoughts in order, so I didn't get sidetracked, and I didn't start to kind of go down rabbit holes. I just hit on each subject that it kind of pointed out in the outline, and ended up getting my presentation done a lot quicker than I would have if I would have just tried to start from scratch and research everything step by step. Should I keep going to the next bullet point?
Go for it. I mean,
okay.
If you think I should have created our agenda using this.
Yeah. So how good are the responses you get from AI chat tools? Simple answer is the answers you get are as good as your prompts. It doesn't do well with very broad questions. If you ask it something like, what's a good digital marketing strategy? You're going to get back a very, very, very broad and generalized answer that may not be 100% accurate. But if you ask it with a prompt, something like, what's the best digital marketing strategy during the summer season for summer dresses in the United States, or something like that, it's going to be able to give you a lot more accurate answer and a lot more information about exactly what your question is, the more precise your prompt is. So, and I actually saw a good example of this when somebody, developer, was using it to build a plugin for WordPress that it didn't exist, and it was simplistic. And he even said he could have built his own plugin for the needs that he wanted in a few days, but he decided to test out ChatGPT, and it took him about 3 times running prompts through. He ran the first prompt through. He thought he was pretty thorough with the question to get the code he needed to write the plugin, and then he started about the plugin and realized there were some gaps, so he had to go back. So if there is anything like that, if you don't find that it's giving you the answer that you thought you were looking for, or you thought was going to be the answer, you can certainly go back and just edit the prompt and just give it more detail or more clarification, and it will give you back better responses. I guess that's one of the main differences between a chatbot and a search engine, is that if you keep manipulating a search and search engines, I don't know if anybody's done this, I know I have, but you'll still get some of the same entries that you got when you searched the first time and they weren't correct. So you just keep on searching and searching and searching, trying to figure out, well, how do I get what I need to populate? But with ChatGPT, it actually gives you fresh answers every time. It's not going to be redundant. So the answers that you get, or responses that you get, the output from these tools, are only going to be as good as the prompts you put in. So as accurate, as precise as you can be with it, you're going to get back much better answers that you can use. It's going to need a lot less editing, and you could just kind of dive right into, giving it more emotion or more tone or more voice to actually who your audience is or who's going to interact with it. And that kind of leads into how current is it. That's the other thing. Again, it's not a search engine. Search engines are current. Like if you search movie times for today, you're going to get movie times for today, because these crawlers are going out multiple times every single day to gather information that businesses put online. These chatbots are not necessarily current up to today. the information is old because there's still somebody that has to update this data. And it is historical information it's scraping. So it's not to the point where it's learning on its own per se. Like it's not going out there. It's not saying today's the 17th of February. I need to go out there and scrape new information for today for anybody that might be searching or prompting for answers about anything happening on today's date. It's still a static tool. So it's only as good as the programmers and the people that build it. So some of the information, if you're looking for information for the day of the search, you might get more accurate information by doing the research in search engines as opposed to a prompt, or if you're just asking a generalized question, that's not, a question about any kind of current events, you're going to get back some good answers to ChatGPT. It just might not be the most current information. And then let's see, for ChatGPT and competitors, it is branching out.
Oh, can you pause there?
I
have a question around the data. Can you tell me where the data is coming from? Like, is it coming from like the internet? Is it coming from databases somewhere else? Like, where's the data coming from to generate the responses?
So hypothetically everywhere. So it's accessing databases, it's accessing anything it could scrape online, social media, aggregation sites, listing sites, basically anything online is what it's scraping. But that's why some of the information isn't as current as if you just did a Google search. Because if it's scraping historical information. It's not going out there and scraping information today to use today.
Okay.
There's like a lag period.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, well, you can see on the screen, I just asked that question to it, and what Jim brought up about the data model and where it stops September 2021. But I think what's fascinating to me is just like that type of question to do the research. Traditionally, using search engines, you're going to get a whole bunch of results that you have to comb through and form your own kind of research decision. Whereas here, you're getting like kind of a summary. Who knows how good it is or accurate it is, but you're getting a summary that comes back to you and you can hopefully trust is accurate.
I mean, to the end, one of the things that I find interesting about it, and Jim, you kind of alluded to this, but like, it's not just I type in a question and it spits out an answer, finding the answer in its database. It's like creating the answer based on, I don't know what neural network means precisely, but it's like, it's interpreting all of the data to give you the best answer back. So that's another reason to me, it's like not a search engine. A search engine's like, here's the question you asked, here's the best answer I see to your question. This is looking at, here's the 25 best answers to your question. Let me write it back to you in the way you're asking for it, which is the way that, to me, it's like doing a first draft of an essay or a paper. It's like you do all the research, then you figure out how to present that research in a first draft. And then maybe an editor comes and looks at it and says, hey, you could tighten this up, or you're missing this piece of information. But that's what it feels like to me.
No, you're right. And that's where a lot of people, I think, fell into a hole before, was they took this to be, like gospel. Like I asked it a question, it gave me the answer looks right to me, so I'm going to copy and paste it. And exactly what you said, that's not the case. It's just giving you all the data you'd have to research. You still have to put eyes on it. You still have to proof it. You have to give it some kind of voice, because it's not like we can click a button and say, I want this to be in an aggressive tone, or I want this to be in a placated tone. It's still just giving you raw information that you have to mold into, okay, it gave me everything I need. Now I just have to kind of rearrange it and piece it together in a format that makes sense.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up was my experience in trying to write an outline for a client for a piece of content. And what I found is that, and as Jim said, it's like, you really need to know how how it works and how to prompt it. So, for example, one of the things that I did was I said, okay, give me an outline on this topic. And it did, and it was great. And then I said, okay, now take that outline, and if you can integrate the case study that my client has. And it gave me an outline that at first looked great, but it totally changed the whole topic. When you look at it, it was like, well, wait a minute, it's not quite right. And so I kind of spent the afternoon going, all right, how am I going to do that? And it was like, it took twice the time because it wasn't, like you said, shades of meaning, where things belong. It's still you're still going to need a human element to work things out. And two, I think it reminds me, and I'm going to date myself. It reminds me in the early days of computers when you had to learn basic language in order to get a computer to do what you wanted it to do. And I think it's early days. You need to know how this works in order to get it to do what you want it to do. So I would say to a lot of content writers out there, experiment. And I'm hoping that there are courses that come out that teach content people how to prompt properly, because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of problems in the future. That said, Jim, I've heard, right, these things are learning at warp speed though, right? And they double their capabilities in weeks. Is that right?
Yes, they're learning, but one thing to remember is that kind of what you said about the prompts. A misconception is that it's called a large language model, an LLM. It's not a natural language model. So I've seen a couple of use cases where it seemed like a pretty easy, straightforward prompt, and it was confusing a chatbot because there's slang being used, there's some misspellings of words, the grammar wasn't 100% point on, because it was like I forget where they were located, but it was like the dialect they were kind of using, and just like the meaning of words were different where they're from. So it's not a natural language model yet. So it's not a conversational interaction where you're like, hey, give me this information, and it knows what you're talking about. It's a large language model, which just means it's collecting a lot of content, a lot of data, a lot of information. So that's where you just need to know kind of what you said. We have to know how to arrange the prompt and exactly how to ask it to get the right kind of output, because it's not going to do it the other way around. It's not going to try and figure out what we're saying. We need to try and figure out how for it to give us the prompt that we want.
Yeah, I saw a prediction online that there will be jobs for really good prompters. Like a really good prompter will be an actual role at a company because they're good at it. And it, Lisa, to your point, I had thought about the same thing as far as like when you're standing behind somebody that's searching in Google and they're doing a terrible job of trying to find the information and they're putting in the wrong things. And you're like, no, don't search like that. Do this instead. This is how Google works. So you know what you're going to get back. I think you're right on that. The more you know the tool, the better you'll be able to use it. And there's going to need to be translation for clients as far as like, use it to do this, not to do that. Here's how to use it because here's how it works. And here's what needs to be done by human because this tool can't do it. So, Jeff, it looked like you were trying to say something. You came off mute. All right, cool. Let's keep going. There he is.
Let's see. Next, I was just going to mention that, ChatGPT and its competitors are beginning to become a tool for complex developer and production teams for site and application builds. Now, again, this isn't to say that you can prompt it to build a complex, comprehensive website from scratch, and that's exactly what it will give you. But how it's being leveraged are more for the mundane day-to-day or one-off instances. Like I used the case before where there was a simplistic plugin that just wasn't available. I think it had to do with like a randomizer, where they wanted the functionality on their site. So if users, it was more transparent to the user in the community that when they did these randomized drawings, they got to see it in an animation on the website, and it was more accurate, or as accurate at least, as these randomizer type websites. But there's no plugin that exists for it. So instead of the guy spending a couple of days creating the plugin himself for WordPress, he actually prompted ChatGPT to spit out the code. And after, I think it took him about 4 prompts to get the code he needed, then through a couple of minutes of testing, it actually worked. Like he was able to create a brand new plugin that didn't exist the day before for something they needed right now. Like I said, nothing too complex though. So where a lot of production teams or development, even design teams are using this to generate code to help them on their day-to-day. It's more for like the redundant tasks, the QA tasks, or like, the simple tasks that, just generating the piece of code. It's not hard, it's not difficult, it's just time consuming. So they're prompting it, or if there's a bug, if there's a glitch, they're using ChatGPT to QA that code section to figure out what the issue is, where the disconnect is, and what the fix is, instead of having to do that manual research themselves. And there is actually a natural integration between GitHub and ChatGPT. There's actually hundreds of different integrations with a bunch of different platforms, because again, ChatGPT is just a tool. So being a tool, it can integrate with other systems to help enhance it. GitHub's one of them. That's pretty much the biggest one I know of, at least right now, that a developer would use. But it integrates with obviously a lot of mail systems, everything from Gmail on Salesforce. So it'll be interesting as this kind of matures and grows out, and these integrations get a little bit easier to make for the connections. How some of these processes through, multiple industries can be streamlined. So some of these day-to-day tasks can be taken off the hands of a human and let them do the more complex things that are needed that, something like a chatbot can't do. And a lot of automation could run through these chatbot responses. They use it a lot in real estate. They actually use it a lot in local government, like HR, municipal resources, and places like that.
Hey, Jim, I want to open it up to like dev team, design team, based on what Jim just said from a code and initial standpoint. Any thoughts there? Anything you're already seeing or have seen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen some extensions for Visual Code or Visual Studio. That's what the developers use to write code in-house, where you can just ask a simple question like how to make an array in JavaScript. Show me an example, and it will write the code out for you. Or you can even ask it a question of like a JavaScript question, like how do I, show me how to do a click on hover or a toggle switch on JavaScript. And you can type out the question and it will write out the code for you now on how to do it. Where normally we're like searching Google and like finding other forums of people showing us how to do that code or different examples. And you're spending that time researching. Now it's like, let me just type how I want to do it into almost a code internet. Let's just think about it like a code Google, right? So I'm trying to figure out how to do something in code. Show me how to do it. And I type in the question and it shows me how to do it, where normally we're searching forever on how to do that. So there's definitely things definitely important.
Yeah, and Jeff, when they built ChatGPT, just a quick side note, they actually built this from the start to understand most programming languages. So if you needed to be more specific than that, like say for instance, you needed to be in Python, if you prompt it for Python, it knows what you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. And that's what we're seeing, and definitely I'm seeing like a lot of like Instagram videos and stuff like that of coders like just using things like ChatGPT to code things, and I'm just like, wow, this is great. But it goes back to what Lisa's saying on the prompts, and definitely looking over your code or your content or what it's spitting out. Like, is it accurate? Like. And that's the part that scares me too. It's like, oh, if I just copy this and put this in as a junior developer and thinking and run this to production, most like it's going to break, like we need to be checking over anything that we're getting out of this system and verifying that it's correct. Like I still think like the experts are still going to be needed for a very long time because there's so many flaws with technology. We know that, right? So I feel like we're still going to be needed to be reviewing, looking over this, or just using it just for startups. My opinion.
Oh
Jeff,
yeah, absolutely. And
to
then
your point there. Sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say from a marketing perspective, I've already asked it to write schema I wasn't familiar with, and I've asked it to write event triggers that
Yeah.
marketers would use. It wouldn't be an everyday, like it wouldn't go on every website, it wouldn't be something that a production team would just instinctively do on a
Right.
given page. So I prompted it to write some new schema that was available, and I asked it to write different event triggers that I could ship over to like Leandra to add to like a button so I could track it in analytics.
Nice.
And I mean, I knew what to ask it though, because I know exactly what I needed, which goes back to what we all keep on saying: the prompt, the output you get is only as good as the input that you give it. So I knew exactly what I needed. So I just typed in however much I needed to type in to get that information. And it was really accurate down to, as soon as I gave it to Leandra to test out, it worked. I didn't have to go, I didn't have to research, I didn't have to double check, because I'm not in code every day, so I know how a line of code looks for like an event trigger, but I can't write it over and over again just from memory because I don't do it enough. So having it, seeing it, and knowing that it gave me that in like a couple of seconds, and within 10 minutes we were able to start tracking stuff. It helps the marketing team with some of these one-off kind of code updates or tracking updates that might be needed on websites.
Yeah.
I wanted to add on to Jeff's point, because I see the questions that I know, Ben, you wanted to comment on Lisa's question in the chat, but like, when Jeff, you're saying like people see us as the experts, one of the things that has given me comfort with ChatGPT AI is that it feels very similar to disruption we've had with Google, with other, like, we've had this level of disruption before. What it means to be an expert here is, I think, still the true for us. Like, to take Lisa's example, we are not expected to be subject matter experts on everything our clients know. We are expected to be like, have the critical thinking skills to be able to know how to get that information. And so in that way, ChatGPT can be a tool for that, the same way that, if you stop and ask for directions, you ask someone who's local, you don't need them to tell you the name of every street. You need them to tell you how to get there with the information you already have, right? It used to be an expert on Python, or not Python, to be an expert on, BASIC, probably, you'd had to have coded thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of BASIC, and that's what made you an expert developer. That's not what makes somebody an expert developer anymore. Now it's like, you have to know how to do it right. And if you can do it right, you can do it for most any language. Same with if you're writing a blog post or doing content strategy. If you know how to do it effectively, you can adapt to the tools and the information you need. And that's what makes you an expert. It's not that you know the most about that company's business of anyone else in the world. It's that you know how to communicate that effectively. And here, like, there is a degree of people who have been calling themselves experts for years that something like ChatGPT just flat out replaces, because they weren't actually experts. They were just good at summarizing other people's research. We're talking about like being able to do an effective prompt. Like, that's a skill that you probably can put a dollar amount on, but if you can write requirements, if you can write an outline for someone else to write to, if you can read someone's work and say what's wrong, you've got the base skills to be able to do an effective prompt. And if you can't do those things, then you'll have to learn how, because that's the skill set that's always been most valuable in what we're doing here.
Yeah, I almost see it as running, as an editor. You say, okay, ChatGPT, you're my writer. Go ahead, write it. But you have to bring it back and go, did they do it right? Is this working? So yeah, if you look at it that way, instead of the end all be all, bow down to what it says every time. Yeah.
One of the examples that I heard given that I really loved recently was Disney, when technology came out to replace artists that were drawing everything out, and they could generate a background and they could generate things and use them a lot quicker. And if you think of that and the innovation, there were probably a lot of junior people that got replaced by the technology, but in a sense, like, Disney grew from that and became much bigger, leveraging the technology. And I think that's kind of like an inflection point where we might be at as well. Lisa, you brought up a question around in the chat, which is a deep question, but based on what you heard in the podcast, people will be able to create their own websites, and website designers will be obsolete. I think we'd all want to say we completely disagree with that. But it's a good food for thought and conversation. Before I dive into that, I want to just show one thing that's related there, which is that it's not just about text. These AI engines are also about their engines can be used to create things like images. So OpenAI also has this DALL-E 2, which you can use it to, say, generate an image for me or a logo or something, and it comes back with something generated from a system. And there's Midjourney, which is another one that gets a lot of popularity and is really cool as well. But all that to say, the interesting thing there is that it's not just text. The AI can be used to create other things, and those things will stack on top of each other to eventually maybe be able to build a whole website. I have a prediction on that. One last thought, and then I just open it up, but that we will probably be able in the future to train models to replicate like the digital style guide for a brand, the editorial style guide for a brand, the voice and tone, the way it gets spoken about, let's say, and that model becomes our model, and then it can write, chat, respond to us, create things and whatever. But I personally don't believe that will ever fully replace human because of the things that, Lisa and everybody has already brought up. But go ahead, Jeff.
Where does like copyright come in to that?
Good question.
And
For
even
this
in
text to image,
ChatGPT, like, I mean, image is one thing, because I've been seeing that there's been some copyright issues with the images. What about like the content that ChatGPT spits out? Like, what about copyright infringements there? Like, how do you know if you're not stealing someone else's like stuff?
there are programs now that you can run it through that detects AI plagiarism.
Okay.
But for the most part, that's why we keep on trying to iterate. It's a start. It's a foundation. It's not meant to be a copy and paste mode. Even much of the information that we may generate using ChatGPT, we're revising it a lot, enough for it not to trigger anything related to plagiarism online. So it's not giving, because it's not coming from one direct source. So unless you're asking it to cite sources for you, which it can do when you're asking it for statistics, if it's pulling from 8,000 different microblogs, websites, aggregate sites, listing sites, social media accounts, if it's pulling one word from 8,000 different places, there's nothing to citate, because there's not enough to plagiarize. One word out of one social media post is not plagiarism. So
yeah, the like everything that I've seen on this, especially on the graphic side of things, is that like by the letter of the law, there's not a lot of intellectual property like risk of using these tools, but there are a lot of like ethical questions that like they're the same kinds of questions, frankly, we should be asking ourselves when we are like being influenced or copying a line of code from GitHub or like whatever, like the things we do every day. But like, where's that line between borrowing, being influenced by, and copying? Is like, that's a whole other hour or more of talk. But the intellectual content, like intellectual property side of things here, everything that I have seen, these companies are fairly protected because their databases that they're modeled from are databases that have been made available to them. Now, people might have contributed to those things like Wikipedia or like online art sites without realizing what the terms of use were when they contributed. And that's one of the other pieces here, is read the terms of use before you load anything online, because you could see your words rewritten somewhere else later and you shouldn't expect to get paid for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, I feel like
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm old enough at this point where I feel like I've been through a few waves of things that were supposed to end web designers like careers. And I'm not saying it never will happen, because like I will be the first one to admit I'm like one of the most paranoid people about stuff like this. I've watched way too many post-apocalyptic movies, but I feel like where it is right now, to me, it sounds like exactly like when I was in college and Google Translate came out and everybody was like, everybody's going to use this for all their language classes and nobody's going to know. And it's like, yeah, you tried it and you got to
You
see.
could not, you failed, trust me.
Nope. And listen, I'm not saying I didn't do it because I had other things going on. I didn't write that paper in Spanish, but I think Tyler just hit on something as well. Is like when we go out and look for inspiration, whether it's through visual or music or whatever, like you can take the super cynical approach that there is nothing original anymore. And like, so influence, right? So if I'm looking on DeviantArt, like that person put that up there without any expectations to be paid. Or, another company puts their logo out there and you see it every day. You can't help but that there's an amount of osmosis. So much like if you're writing text, I feel like if you wanted as a designer to, potentially use something like this, where you said, draw me a logo for you can use it as a starting point. You might take that file just like you would from any free vector site sometimes and go, this has got like the 10 lines that I think I need to start, and then take it from there. But where we are right now, I just feel like in terms of AI is like, even with accessibility, like there's still a point where it reaches, it's got to be a human thing. I just hope it stays that way, or that I'm not here when that overhaul happens. That's me.
Well, one of the things, if you saw, there was an article that someone had asked ChatGPT to write a song in the form of Nick Cave, and gave it to Nick Cave. And Nick Cave is like, that's great, but it's only a copy of a copy. And I'm wondering if that's all AI will ever be able to do, a copy of a copy. It's aggregating everything it always has been. And also to the point of not having critical thinking. If it isn't doing critical thinking, writers, I know a lot of writer friends that are freaking out going, I'm going to be obsolete. No one's going to, call me as a freelancer. The reality is they might not if you don't know how to use ChatGPT. But if you know how to use ChatGPT, and I think about it sometimes as, oh, good, ChatGPT can do the boring stuff that's really long and tedious, and then I can get to putting it together in my creative way, in my critical thinking way, and offer that. And I think overall, that's what they've been trying to tell us. It's not AI and that's it. It's human plus AI. But like you said, let's hope we keep that value, because I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Yeah, Lisa, love that. I mean, and that's kind of what prompted this conversation is, it's always innovate and die. Digital marketing is always moving at light speed and changing and evolving. So that segues into a question that's on the agenda for us to discuss, like, where is there opportunity for us to leverage it, where we should be leveraging it, not just to do it, but already for the things that we currently do. I know Jim told me we leveraged it to come up with the first ideas for frequently asked questions for a client. And then, that wasn't final by any means. It needed to be revised and refined. But I keep thinking of these like the bookends, right? Where there's strategy and planning and thinking that the human needs to do. That's the prompts and things that need to go into the system. And then it could do a lot of the things in between, but then it needs somebody on the other end to be able to actually refine it, make sure it works and, speaks the language the way we want, is not broken or anything. But I kind of want to open it up. Like, we all know what our company does. Where are there use cases for this technology right away where we could either create efficiency or differentiation?
I've got a suggestion, which is, I think everyone who gets a task that they wish they could delegate to someone else, that's the kind of stuff that we should be seeing, is like, AI is an intern that can work way better than any other intern ever could, right? It's the smartest junior level team member any of us have ever worked with. And so it is one of the things that we could immediately be using it for is any task, anything that comes across that's like, I wish I could delegate this to someone else. I wish someone else could do it and I could review what they did, whatever that is. And maybe it's not ChatGPT, but whether it's like designing logos, anything like that, like there's something there that we could be using tools like this. And to that point, like, some of these tools are free, readily available, already being used. It's the same as like developers using a plugin rather than rebuilding code. Like, if we think about it that way, and if everyone individually starts to think about like, oh, this task, I'm doing it, but I wish I could just review what someone else did. That's an opportunity to see, like, is there a tool that could help automate this and do it faster?
This reminds me, one video that Ben sent me actually for use case on social media was you can ask it to generate a bunch of interesting quotes about, you know, whatever your industry or service is. So you can say, create 5 quotes about the importance of digital marketing for B2B brands. And then it'll come up with those 5 quotes. You can copy and paste those into an Excel spreadsheet, upload them to Canva, and then create graphics based on those quotes that you received. And then you have 5 readily available quote graphics that you can share across your social media. And so that's like a really easy way to just trim down on that time that you would spend designing individual graphics for your social media. And even aside from graphics, of course, you can use it to generate hashtag ideas, to generate entire posts. You can ask it to be fun and engaging, or you can ask it to be a little bit more professional sounding, depending on who your audience is. And you can also use it for email marketing. If you want to use it to generate subject lines to make sure that people are engaged and can open up your email and see everything that you have to offer. Of course, you have to start out with an interesting subject line. So I know that there are paid subject line generators out there, but this one is really great because, I mean, it's free as of now. There's a ChatGPT Plus coming out. But with the free version, you can just ask it to make some email subject lines and choose from there. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of use cases, but I particularly liked that one about being able to create those quick graphics for social media.
And I believe that ChatGPT is integrated in Canva too, right? So if
Yes.
you're having problems accessing, I thought I saw this hack is like, if you're having problems accessing ChatGPT, go to Canva, and then you can log in through Canva, and then that has the integration that will allow you to get in right away.
That's awesome. That's really helpful.
I mean, that's it's a open source database. I think you can download your own instance of ChatGPT and not have to use the public one. But I'm sure that's
Yeah,
Right,
you
that's
can.
correct.
It
Yep.
is open source.
Wow. Anything else in terms of application? And I guess I'd lump into there any tools that we should be using. I mean, I've been hearing in the agency world about Jasper a lot because it is basically like, I don't know if you're looking at my screen, you could see there's like templates that it gives you for common content to start with, like email subject lines, like Lauren was saying, product descriptions, stuff, SEO blog posts, stuff like that. And relative to how much time it probably saves, it's nominal in cost.
I'm wondering if the image prompts are going to create pressure. I was reading HubSpot had, and I can share it in the link. It was how Nike and Tiffany, the collaboration was overshadowed by AI. That, yeah, there was this whole, we're anticipating this wonderful collaboration, and everybody was on AI going, what's it going to look like? Ooh, let's see, it could look like this. And it came out, and everybody's like, the AI was better. And I'm wondering if there's going to be pressure to use AI to see what could be possible and then build upon that.
Yeah, Shutterstock integrates AI now, AI image generation. So now for Shutterstock, if you go, you don't necessarily have to choose anything in their library. You could generate through AI.
Lisa, that's such an interesting idea too, in terms of like even just ad creatives or marketing taglines or whatever, like you can spin up so many more ideas that can be filtered down much more quickly. Not to say that you have to release that to a client right away, but like, you know, internally we could be using it to come up with ideas that we then say, which of these 5 do you like or something like that. So that's cool. Yeah, the Tiffany one was crazy. That happened really quick too. Twitter just blew up and they hated what came out and generated a lot of better images. So
In terms of like how we fit there, I mean, I think, and who gets replaced, I think probably the Fiverr level designer or copywriter or whatever, who's like a freelancer, who's, you know, we've hired blog services to write blog posts, and those blog posts are written by people and they were garbage. So those probably do get replaced. And then the companies that charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for their great brains, and then everyone who isn't their great brains looks at it and says, okay, I guess, you know, all logos look like Google and Slack logos. Those costing the same amount probably isn't the same. I think the type of agency we are, where we're like not looking to be a full service vendor, because vendor work feels like something that gets replaced quickly here, but we're trying to be a partner, and we're trying to help people work effectively and efficiently. Something like, hey, we can give you lots of ideas, we can help streamline those ideas. That might have been 40 hours of a marketer's time coming up with 30,000 log lines, and we don't need to spend that time. We are in a good position, I think, to work quickly and effectively to take advantage of the fact that a lot of things that used to be either seen as cheap that will now be seen as free, or seen as unattainably expensive will now be seen as, I have a $100,000 marketing budget. I feel like I should be able to get more for it. We are the type of agency that says, yes, you should be able to get more for it. Let us help you. As opposed to the larger agencies who are like, well, we've always done it this way and we're not going to change.
Yeah, I'm
I
looking
agree with
at,
Tyler. Yeah, I think it'll help smaller agencies leverage, like, because before all this happened, we couldn't really play on the scale to be a content marketing agency. Now we can. While we may not have 100 copywriters sitting in the room next to us like some huge agencies around the globe, agencies our size could now kind of almost spit out at that same volume if we just have, say, 5 good quality copywriters to review all the content ideation and research generation done through chatbots.
yeah, and I'm looking at what Jennifer popped into the messaging. She's saying content calendars, messaging fillers, elevator pitches. And I know Lauren and I were talking about that the other day, the staring at the blank screen. That is sometimes, sitting there going, how do I start? That takes time. And that's the worst part of coming up with content, is staring at that blank screen. It's scary and it's a little time consuming, because you're like, am I going to get an idea? And then you're like, yes, I did. This can help feed ideas, which is really, I wouldn't discount that. I think that's really valuable.
Just to one last point, to one of our goals as a company is to talk about how we can do scalable services. In my mind, the speed that things happen, and the speed, especially clients who aren't going to understand, we have clients right now who think building a website, designing a website is you click a button and it happens, right? They already think that. So it's hard to get them to see the value of our time sometimes. I'm paying you 15 hours a month. Shouldn't I be getting more for that? If we're able to crack the nut on here's the value you're getting from us as experts beyond the time that we spend on it, then something like I'm starting my harvest timer and staring at a blank screen for 15 minutes, I'm still working, becomes a lot less important. It's something that we don't need to worry about as much if we can help communicate the value of this isn't about the hours it took us to do, it's about the value you got back from what was produced.
Tyler, do you think that's going to affect agencies and how they bill?
I think time and materials is going to continue to be something that gets pushed and pushed and pushed, but that's always been the case.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to Tyler's point, there's opportunity to innovate right away on some of our current clients where that's the case, where they see us as delivering value. And it's a question of either how much more value can we provide inside those same dollars, or what else can we be doing with the technology to increase the value that we provide for even increased dollars. I mean, knowing how to use the tool when a team doesn't have a copywriter, let's say, and to Jim's point, didn't ever see us as a content strategy or content marketing agency. And now all of a sudden we're leveraging into that is super helpful. And I think, Tyler, you're right on in terms of the tasks. Like Jennifer, Lisa just went through that list, but that list of ideation for content strategy, content creation, draft form, social media posting, calendaring, and getting it out there, and even any of the dev stuff, which is not super clear to me as far as how that could be leveraged. But I would just challenge you all to say, like, feel free to try and use it, even if it speeds up how quickly you get things done. And you're able to say, like, hey, I use this to do it. Great. If you need tools for it, raise your hand and say so, because I'm always looking to innovate and show people what we can do.
Question from my side: if we were doing like a content planning session, are you able to look up like content ideas around X, and then it's giving us some ideas around that potentially, so that we could use that as a starting point for sessions like that?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you could. You just want to be careful with how you, like I said at the beginning, you don't want to be general and just say, give me content ideas around milk. Like if it's for Strauss, you don't want that. Like you'd want to say something they're prompted with, give me 15 popular, most searchable topics related to dairy farms that incorporate sustainable manufacturing operations. Like that's the kind of prompt you want to give it. That will give you more output that Strauss could use.
I'm just thinking for like our sessions, that'd be cool to like just try and search and use this and come with some ideas that help us to get the creative juices flowing. But the intern did some of the work back there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you just got to be careful with how you prompt it. You want to make sure that you're incorporating, of course, like what's the ask? What do you want out of it? Content creation ideas. But then you also want to incorporate, you don't just want to give it that blank of a canvas to say, give me content. You got to narrow it down a little bit, whether it be by industry, by target persona, by target audience, by, some kind of like limiting factor. So it doesn't just give you a whole bunch of generalized content creation ideas. Like if you did that now, you just probably get content creation ideas around Valentine's Day, President's Day, different holidays, different national days in February.
Look, here's a content calendar, and I love this.
I think one thing that
Wow.
it can't take away from us, though, is the strategy that we put behind all
Sure,
our
no,
content.
yeah.
I mean, yes, it can maybe help us define an audience or a persona, but it can't build out a journey of where
No,
these
yeah.
people go step by step. So
Mhm.
there's definitely more in terms of what we have to offer when it comes to the thinking and the strategy and the planning behind something versus just the execution
Totally,
of what it actually is.
totally agree.
Like the whole Nick Cave thing, it's only going to recycle everything that it can glean.
That's
There's
that's
no
already out there.
innovation. Yeah, it's up
Correct.
to people to innovate.
I don't know if we ever want this thing to start learning or thinking ahead of itself.
No.
What's that Will Smith movie?
iRobot.
Ah.
Think of
iRobot.
Terminator. This is a Skynet.
Yeah,
Skynet.
exactly. I think
Again,
that's when you get into the realm of this could really go south quickly, is if it starts thinking for itself and asking questions for itself.
Well, you saw that conversation the other day in New York Times.
No, but I
Oh, I
remember
posted
the
it.
first prompt somebody gave it when this was first released was it asked it if it was God, and I forget what its answer was, but it was terrifying.
Yeah, and the constant, do you like me? Do you trust me? Do you like me? Do you trust me? Oof.
Like Megan, that dog.
Wait, am I
Yeah.
not supposed to be thinking that
Oh.
constantly? Am I an AI?
I think I'm a robot.
So we have 1 minute left. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate geeking out and innovating here. I think, a couple of key takeaways. First of all, like any notes that anybody has that you want to put in that agenda, I'll share the agenda to put things in there. The two key takeaways that I have is like us all knowing the tools that apply to our job will elevate us. That's a really, good takeaway, just to like start studying what's already out there for you and your role. And then getting good at prompting came up a lot as far as like, what is a good prompt and how do we give good input? So we could do some more research on that, but just starting the conversation here. Let's keep it going on Slack, and appreciate you all joining Geeking Out.